The morning sun painted the London skyline with golden hues as news spread across the city like wildfire. Prince William and Catherine, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, were finally returning home after their extended diplomatic mission to the Commonwealth nations. For 3 months, the royal couple had been traveling across Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, strengthening bonds and representing the Crown in crucial state visits. Sarah Mitchell, a florist from Covent Garden, was among the first to hear the announcement on BBC Radio while arranging roses in her shop. Her hands paused mid-stem as the presenter's excited voice filled the small space. The royal couple would arrive at Heathrow Airport at exactly 3 in the afternoon, and then proceed through central London to Buckingham Palace. What started as a simple homecoming quickly transformed into something much more significant. Within hours, the Mayor of London's office received hundreds of calls from citizens eager to organize a proper welcome. Local businesses offered to sponsor events. Musicians volunteered their services, and community groups began planning street parties. The spontaneous outpouring of affection surprised even seasoned royal watchers who had covered dozens of official events. Margaret Thompson, a retired teacher from Westminster, stood in her kitchen making dozens of cucumber sandwiches while her radio played patriotic songs. She had decided to host a tea party for her entire street, despite never having organized anything larger than a birthday celebration. Her neighbor, Ahmed Hassan, who ran the corner shop, donated cases of sparkling cider and promised to close early to join the festivities. The energy was infectious. Children at local schools began making welcome signs during art class, while their teachers struggled to maintain normal lessons amid the excitement. Little Emma Rodriguez, only 7 years old, carefully painted "Welcome Home" in bright purple letters on a piece of cardboard, determined to hold it high enough for the royal couple to see from their car. As the day progressed, something remarkable began to happen across London's diverse neighborhoods. In Brixton, a steel drum band started practicing celebration songs. In Camden, street artists created temporary murals featuring British flags intertwined with flowers. Even in areas not typically associated with royal enthusiasm, people found themselves caught up in the collective joy. The London Symphony Orchestra, which had been rehearsing for an upcoming tour, received an unexpected call from Buckingham Palace. Would they be available to perform an impromptu outdoor concert in Hyde Park that evening? The musicians, many of whom had busy schedules and personal commitments, unanimously agreed to cancel their plans. This was history in the making, and they wanted to be part of it. By noon, the transformation of London was already visible from satellite images. Crowds were gathering along the proposed route from Heathrow to the palace. Red, white, and blue decorations appeared on lampposts, shop windows, and even construction sites. The usually bustling city had taken on a festival, atmosphere that made even hardened commuters smile as they navigated their way to work. Television. Crews from around the world began arriving to document what was quickly being called the most spontaneous royal celebration in decades. Unlike carefully planned state ceremonies, this event was organically growing from the genuine affection of ordinary people who simply wanted to show their appreciation for the royal couple's tireless work representing Britain abroad. The couple themselves were still somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, completely unaware that their simple homecoming had sparked a citywide celebration. In a few hours, they would land to discover that London had transformed itself into one enormous welcome party, orchestrated not by protocol officers or event planners, but by the heartfelt enthusiasm of millions of people who considered them family. The afternoon air buzzed with anticipation as thousands of people lined the streets from Heathrow Airport to central London. What had started as individual acts of enthusiasm had evolved into a coordinated celebration that impressed even the most experienced event organizers. Police officers, initially concerned about crowd control, found themselves smiling and accepting cups of tea from well-wishers who had set up impromptu refreshment stands along the route. At Heathrow, airport security worked overtime to manage the growing crowd of people, hoping to catch a glimpse of the royal arrival. Families with young children claimed spots behind the barriers hours before the scheduled landing time. James Wellington, a businessman who had been waiting for his own flight, canceled his trip to Edinburgh when he realized he was about to witness something extraordinary. He called his wife to explain why he would be late for their anniversary dinner. The royal flight touched down at precisely 3 o'clock to find the airport's observation deck packed with cheering spectators. Even airport staff who had seen countless VIP arrivals gathered at windows to watch the plane taxi to its designated gate. The couple emerged looking refreshed despite their long journey, but their expressions quickly changed to amazement as they saw the size of the crowd that had gathered to welcome them home. Catherine appeared first, wearing an elegant navy blue dress that perfectly captured the moment's significance without being overly formal. Her smile widened as she heard the cheers echoing across the tarmac. William followed, his hand briefly touching his wife's back in a gesture that photographers would later describe as both protective and surprised. Neither of them had expected such an overwhelming reception for what was supposed to be a quiet return to London. Their official car, flanked by motorcycle escorts, began the journey into the city at a deliberately slow pace to accommodate the crowds. Along the A4, families had positioned themselves on footbridges waving flags and homemade banners. The Patel family from Hounslow had driven from 3 different locations to ensure their children could see the procession, with grandfather Raj holding 2-year-old Priya on his shoulders, while she clutched a small Union Jack. As the motorcade entered West London, the celebration reached new heights. The sound of church bells rang out from St. Mary's in Chiswick, followed by every other church along the route as word spread among the clergy. Father Michael O'Connor, who had served his parish for 30 years, later admitted he had never felt such a spontaneous urge to ring the bells outside of Christmas morning. Street musicians positioned themselves at major intersections, creating an impromptu soundtrack for the royal journey. A young violinist named Sophia Petrov, who usually busked in Covent Garden, had recruited her friends from music college to form a small orchestra on Hammersmith Bridge. Their rendition of Jerusalem brought tears to the eyes of many spectators, including several tough construction workers who had abandoned their afternoon shift to join the celebration. The couple's car paused several times to allow William and Catherine to wave more personally to the crowds. At one stop near Kensington Gardens, Catherine noticed a group of children from a local school who had been waiting for hours. She persuaded her security detail to allow a brief walkabout, during which she accepted dozens of flowers and spoke with teachers who were struggling to maintain their composure. 8-year-old Marcus Johnson, who had been practicing his curtsy for weeks after hearing rumors of the royal return, finally got his chance to meet the Duchess. His mother had driven from Birmingham specifically for this moment, and when Catherine complimented his perfect bow, his face lit up with a joy that would be remembered by his family for generations. The spontaneous nature of the event created magical moments that no amount of planning could have orchestrated. When the royal car stopped at traffic lights near Hyde Park Corner, ordinary commuters found themselves cheering alongside the organized crowd. A taxi driver named Frank Morrison opened all his windows and played God Save the Queen from his radio, while his passenger, a visiting American tourist, recorded everything on her phone to show her friends back home. The energy was building towards something even more spectacular, as word spread that the evening's concert in Hyde Park would feature not just the London Symphony Orchestra, but surprise guest performers who were arriving from across the country. London was transforming into a stage for one of the most heartfelt royal celebrations in modern history. Hyde Park had transformed into an outdoor cathedral of celebration by early evening. The London Symphony Orchestra's instruments gleamed under the hastily erected stage lights as sound technicians performed last-minute checks on equipment that had been assembled in record time. What started as a simple concert idea had grown into a full-scale festival, featuring musicians, artists, and performers who had traveled from across Britain to participate in the historic evening. The park's famous speakers' corner area had been converted into a family zone, where children could participate in royal-themed activities, while their parents saved spots closer to the main stage. Local artists volunteered to paint faces with British flags and crowns, while members of the Girl Guides distributed thousands of small flags they had been making throughout the afternoon in community centers across London. Eleanor Davies, a professional event coordinator who had organized royal weddings and state dinners, arrived at Hyde Park as a regular citizen, but found herself naturally taking charge of crowd management. She had recognized several logistical challenges that could dampen the celebration and quietly began coordinating with park officials and volunteers to ensure everyone could enjoy the evening safely. The diverse crowd reflected London's multicultural spirit perfectly. Families from every background imaginable had come together for this shared moment of joy. The Khan family from Tower Hamlets sat on picnic blankets beside the Johnsons from Surrey, sharing homemade samosas with their new friends while their children played together, despite having met only hours earlier. As the sun began to set, creating a golden backdrop behind the stage, surprise guest performers started arriving through discreet entrances. Ed Sheeran, who had been recording in a nearby studio, appeared first with just his guitar and a simple request to contribute to the evening. His impromptu performance of Perfect created a magical moment that had couples throughout the crowd holding hands and swaying together. The London Youth Choir, comprised of teenagers from comprehensive schools across the capital, delivered a stunning rendition of Somewhere from West Side Story that showcased the incredible talent nurtured in London's state education system. Their conductor, Mrs. Patricia Williams, had taught music in challenging urban schools for 25 years and had never seen her students perform with such confidence and pride. When Prince William and Catherine arrived at Hyde Park, they were escorted not to a formal royal box but to a simple platform that allowed them to stand among the crowd. This decision, made personally by William despite security concerns, created an unprecedented sense of intimacy between the royal family and the public. Catherine was visibly moved by the warmth of the reception, particularly when she noticed elderly veterans in wheelchairs, who had been given places of honor near the front. The London Symphony Orchestra's performance began with Elgar's Nimrod, its soaring melody carrying across the park and beyond into the surrounding neighborhoods. Windows in nearby apartments opened as residents leaned out to listen, while traffic on Park Lane slowed as drivers tried to catch glimpses of the extraordinary scene unfolding in the heart of London. During a particularly moving moment in the concert, a spontaneous sing-along erupted when the orchestra began playing Abide With Me. The hymn, traditionally associated with remembrance and homecoming, proved to be the perfect choice for the evening. Voices from across the park joined together in harmony, creating an emotional climax that left few dry eyes among the estimated 50,000 people in attendance. The technical crew, led by sound engineer Marcus Thompson, had worked miracles to ensure perfect acoustics across such a large space. Using equipment borrowed from 3 different concert venues and powered by generators that usually served construction sites, they created a sound system that carried every note clearly to the furthest reaches of the crowd. Local restaurants and food vendors, initially concerned about the disruption to their normal business, discovered that the celebration had created the busiest evening of their year. Pizza shops stayed open past midnight, fish and chip vendors ran out of supplies, and ice cream trucks that had rushed to the area found themselves serving customers until dawn. The royal couple's obvious genuine pleasure at the evening's events created a feedback loop of joy that energized the entire crowd. When William borrowed a conductor's baton to lead the orchestra in a playful rendition of Yellow Submarine, the resulting laughter and applause could be heard several miles away, causing people throughout central London to step outside their homes to investigate the source of such infectious happiness. As the concert reached its crescendo, the celebration spread far beyond Hyde Park's boundaries into every corner of London. Pub landlords who had initially worried about losing customers to the outdoor event discovered their establishments had become overflow venues for people watching live broadcasts of the performance. The Lamb and Flag in Covent Garden, typically quiet on weekday evenings, found itself packed with strangers who had become fast friends through their shared excitement. Television coverage of the event had captured international attention, with news networks from around the world broadcasting live from London. The BBC's cameras captured not just the main stage performances, but the countless smaller celebrations happening simultaneously across the city. In Brixton, a street party had erupted spontaneously with reggae, music blending harmoniously with the classical, sounds drifting from Hyde Park several miles away. The emotional peak of the evening came when the London Children's Choir, representing schools from the most diverse areas of the city, performed an original song they had written that afternoon titled, "Welcome Home Our Prince and Princess." The simple lyrics, crafted by 10-year-old Sarah Ahmed from a Bangladeshi family in Bethnal Green, spoke of love, unity, and the joy of having heroes return safely from their travels. Catherine was visibly moved by the children's performance, accepting a bouquet of flowers picked from London's parks by young volunteers. When she knelt down to speak with Sarah, the young songwriter whispered something that made the Duchess laugh delightedly. Later, palace sources revealed that Sarah had asked if the royal couple would like to come to her grandmother's house for proper Bangladeshi curry, an invitation that perfectly captured the evening's spirit of inclusive celebration. The crowd's diversity created touching moments throughout the park. Rabbi David Goldman from a North London synagogue found himself standing next to Imam Abdullah Hassan from a mosque in South London, both men having brought their families to share in the celebration. Their children played together while the religious leaders discovered they had both served as army chaplains and shared stories of their experiences supporting British troops. Overseas food vendors who had rushed to Hyde Park discovered they were feeding not just hungry concert-goers, but creating a massive community feast. Mrs. Chen, who normally sold dumplings from a small stall in Chinatown, found herself cooking alongside Caribbean cooks, Polish bakers, and traditional British pie makers. The fusion of aromas created a uniquely London atmosphere that represented the city's incredible cultural richness. The London Symphony Orchestra's principal violinist, James Patterson, later described the evening as the most emotionally charged performance of his 30-year career. The audience's energy was so intense that it seemed to lift the music itself, creating moments of transcendence that he had only previously experienced in the world's greatest concert halls. When the orchestra played Jerusalem, the entire park became a choir, with 50,000 voices joining in perfect, unrehearsed harmony. Emergency services, initially worried about crowd control and potential incidents, found themselves managing one of the most peaceful large gatherings in London's history. Police officers reported that the crowd seemed to police itself, with strangers looking after elderly attendees and parents helping to entertain children who weren't their own. Paramedics stationed throughout the park treated only minor cases of emotional overwhelm and joy-induced tears. The celebration's spontaneous nature created logistical challenges that were solved through pure community spirit. When the hastily organized sound system experienced technical difficulties, acoustics professors from Imperial College London appeared with equipment borrowed from their research laboratory. University students formed human chains to distribute water bottles donated by local businesses, while Boy Scouts helped elderly attendees find seating. As midnight approached, the formal concert concluded, but the celebration showed no signs of ending. Street musicians continued performing throughout central London, while house parties erupted in neighborhoods across the city. The royal couple, originally scheduled to return to their residence immediately after the concert, found themselves unable to leave as the crowd's affection and energy proved too compelling to abandon. The evening had evolved into something unprecedented in royal history, a completely organic celebration that demonstrated the genuine affection between the monarchy and the people in a way that no formal ceremony could ever achieve. Social media platforms crashed from the volume of photos and videos being shared, while international news outlets struggled to find adequate words to describe the authentic joy they were witnessing in the British capital. The celebration that began in Hyde Park had grown into a citywide phenomenon that continued well past midnight, with impromptu parties emerging in neighborhoods throughout London. The South Bank, usually quiet after the theaters closed, came alive with musicians who had traveled from the main concert to continue performing along the Thames. The London Eye, illuminated in red, white, and blue for the occasion, provided a spectacular backdrop for couples dancing to music drifting from portable speakers carried by celebrating crowds. In Camden Market, vendors who had closed their stalls hours earlier reopened them voluntarily, serving late-night snacks to revelers who had walked miles from Hyde Park but weren't ready for the celebration to end. The famous market's eclectic mix of food stalls created a perfect metaphor for London itself, with Thai noodles, Jamaican patties, and traditional British bangers and mash being served side by side to hungry celebrants from every walk of life. The spontaneous nature of the evening had created countless personal stories that would be treasured for generations. George Hartley, a widowed pensioner from Bermondsey, had ventured into central London for the first time in years after hearing about the celebration on his radio. He found himself adopted by a young family from Nigeria who insisted he join their picnic and treated him like a beloved grandfather throughout the evening. Transport for London had extended, service hours indefinitely to accommodate the celebrating crowds, with tube drivers volunteering to work extra shifts despite the late hour. The normally efficient but impersonal London Underground system became a moving celebration, with passengers sharing songs and stories about their evening experiences. Several tube cars became impromptu concert venues, with passengers performing acoustic versions of the songs they had heard at Hyde Park. Catherine and William, despite security concerns, had insisted on taking an unscheduled walkabout through the crowd after the formal concert ended. Their decision to mingle personally with the celebrating public created some of the most memorable moments of the entire evening. When they encountered a group of homeless individuals who had been welcomed into the celebration by other attendees, Catherine spent nearly 20 minutes speaking with each person individually, learning their names and stories. The couple's genuine interest in meeting ordinary people created a ripple effect throughout the crowd. Their security detail, initially nervous about the unplanned interactions, gradually relaxed as they witnessed the profound respect and affection the public showed toward the royal couple. Chief Inspector Michael Brooks, responsible for royal protection, later admitted it was the first time in his career he had seen such authentic mutual warmth between the royals and the public. Local hospitals reported an unusual phenomenon. Several patients who had been discharged earlier that day returned to ask if they could watch the celebration from hospital windows, with patients who couldn't leave their beds. Staff at St. Mary's Hospital in Paddington organized impromptu viewing parties in patient lounges, with doctors and nurses taking breaks from their duties to join patients in watching the live television coverage. The celebration had also created unexpected acts of generosity throughout the city. Luxury hotels near Hyde Park opened their lobbies to families with tired children who needed rest before traveling home. The Dorchester's concierge, Maria Santos, coordinated with other hotels to provide comfortable spaces for elderly attendees who wanted to stay near the continuing festivities but needed somewhere quiet to rest. Street artists throughout London had worked through the evening to create temporary murals celebrating the royal homecoming. In Shoreditch, an entire wall had been transformed into a stunning portrait of William and Catherine surrounded by symbols representing London's diverse communities. The artwork, created by volunteers working in relay teams, would be photographed thousands of times before dawn and become one of the most shared images of the entire celebration. The economic impact of the spontaneous celebration surprised local business owners and city officials alike. Restaurants that had been struggling since the pandemic found themselves serving their busiest night in years, while souvenir shops ran out of British-themed merchandise within hours. Even businesses that seemed unrelated to the celebration benefited, as the citywide joy created an atmosphere that encouraged people to spend time and money in ways they normally wouldn't. Radio stations across London had abandoned their regular programming to broadcast live from the various celebration sites throughout the city. DJ Sarah Mitchell from Capital FM found herself hosting an impromptu radio show from a double-decker bus traveling through celebrating neighborhoods, interviewing revelers and playing requests that reflected the evening's magical atmosphere. The foreign media coverage had begun to focus on something unprecedented, a royal celebration that seemed to genuinely represent the will of the people, rather than being organized by palace officials. International correspondents struggled to convey the authenticity of the joy they were witnessing, with many noting that the celebration felt more like a massive family reunion than a formal state occasion. As dawn approached over London, the celebration began to transform from a massive public party into something more intimate and reflective. The crowds in Hyde Park had thinned, but those who remained seemed reluctant to let the magical evening end. Families had claimed spots on the grass where they could watch the sunrise together, sharing thermoses of tea and coffee that appeared from seemingly nowhere as London's legendary community spirit continued to manifest in countless small acts of kindness. The cleanup effort that began at daybreak became another demonstration of civic pride and unity. Volunteers with garbage bags appeared spontaneously, working alongside professional cleaning crews to restore the park to its natural beauty. Children who had fallen asleep in their parents' arms hours earlier woke to find themselves part of a massive community service project, eagerly helping to collect the thousands of small flags and banners that had decorated the celebration. William and Catherine, who had finally returned to their residence in the early morning hours, were already planning their response to the overwhelming public affection they had experienced. Palace sources later revealed that the couple had been deeply moved by the evening's events and wanted to find meaningful ways to acknowledge the community spirit they had witnessed. Their first decision was to request a complete list of everyone who had volunteered to make the celebration possible. The morning news broadcasts struggled to capture the full scope of what had occurred. BBC presenters, many of whom had worked through the night to cover the event, found themselves using language typically reserved for historic occasions. The spontaneous celebration had created what royal historians were already calling a watershed moment in the relationship between the monarchy and the modern British. Public social media analysis revealed that the celebration had generated more positive engagement than any royal event in digital history. The hashtag #WelcomeHomeRoyals had been used over 2 million times, with posts coming not just from Britain but from Commonwealth countries and admirers around the world who had followed the evening's events through live streams and social media coverage. Local schools across London faced an unusual challenge the next morning. Students who were too excited to concentrate on regular lessons after participating in or watching the historic celebration. Teachers, many of whom had attended the event themselves, abandoned their planned curricula to allow children to share their experiences and create art projects inspired by the evening's magical atmosphere. The economic impact of the celebration continued to ripple through London's business community. Hotels reported that bookings for the following week had increased dramatically, as international visitors sought to experience the atmosphere that had been broadcast around the world. Tour companies began organizing special walks that would take visitors to the key locations where the celebration had unfolded. Mrs. Eleanor Davies, the event coordinator who had spontaneously helped manage the crowd at Hyde Park, received a personal phone call from Buckingham Palace, thanking her for her contributions to the evening's success. Her expertise had been quietly essential in ensuring that the massive gathering remained safe and enjoyable for everyone involved, and the royal household wanted to acknowledge her volunteer efforts formally. The London Symphony Orchestra's musicians, despite having performed one of the most emotionally demanding concerts of their careers, found themselves energized rather than exhausted by the experience. Several players later described feeling as though they had participated in musical history, comparing the evening to legendary performances by orchestras during wartime when music served to unite and inspire entire populations. The celebration's impact extended beyond London's borders as news of the evening's success reached communities throughout Britain. Villages and towns across the country began planning their own welcome events for local heroes, returning from military service, inspired by the organic community spirit they had witnessed in the capital. The royal homecoming had inadvertently created a template for grassroots celebration that communities could adapt for their own purposes. International royal families sent congratulatory messages acknowledging the unique bond between the British royals and their people that the celebration had demonstrated. European monarchies, in particular, noted that the evening had showcased a level of genuine public affection that most royal families could only dream of achieving in their own countries. The foreign tourists who had accidentally found themselves part of the celebration created a secondary wave of international interest. Their personal accounts, shared through travel blogs and social media, provided outsider perspectives on British culture that emphasized the warmth, inclusivity, and community spirit that had made the evening so special. As London settled into its normal rhythm the following day, the physical evidence of the celebration gradually disappeared, but the emotional impact remained visible in the smiles of strangers passing each other on the street. The city had experienced something that transcended typical entertainment or ceremony, creating shared memories that would bind its diverse communities together for years to come. In the weeks following the extraordinary celebration, London continued to feel the afterglow of that magical evening. The spontaneous outpouring of joy had created lasting connections between strangers who had shared the experience, with many people reporting that they still exchanged smiles and greetings with individuals they had met during the celebration. Coffee shops and pubs throughout the city became informal gathering, places where people would recount their favorite moments from the evening. Prince William and Catherine made an unprecedented decision to personally thank as many celebration participants as possible. They organized a series of private tea parties at Kensington Palace, inviting small groups of volunteers, performers, and ordinary citizens who had contributed to the evening's success. These intimate gatherings, completely closed to media coverage, allowed the royal couple to express their genuine gratitude without the formality that usually surrounded palace events. Sarah Ahmed, the 10-year-old songwriter whose lyrics had moved Catherine to tears, received a special invitation to visit the palace with her family. During their private meeting, Catherine surprised the young girl by revealing that she had memorized the song and could recite every word. The Duchess also announced that the royal household was establishing a scholarship fund to support young writers from diverse backgrounds across London. The celebration's impact on London's cultural life proved to be profound and lasting. The success of the impromptu concert led to the establishment of an annual community symphony series in Hyde Park, where professional orchestras would perform alongside local musicians and choirs. The first official concert, held exactly 1 year after the royal homecoming, attracted an even larger crowd and established a new London tradition. Local businesses that had benefited from the celebration organized themselves into a network dedicated to supporting community events throughout the year. The spirit of cooperation that had emerged during the royal welcome became a model for how London's diverse business community could work together to enhance the city's cultural offerings and community cohesion. The international attention generated by the celebration had unexpected diplomatic benefits. Several Commonwealth nations, inspired by the demonstration of unity and affection between the British people and their royals, initiated their own programs to strengthen cultural connections with Britain. The evening had inadvertently served as a powerful example of soft diplomacy, showcasing British values and community spirit to a global audience. Academic researchers from universities across London began studying the celebration as a case study in spontaneous community organization. Sociologists were particularly interested in how such a large, diverse group of people had self-organized without central coordination, while urban planners analyzed how the city's infrastructure had adapted to accommodate the unexpected celebration. The children who had participated in the evening's events carried the memory forward in ways that surprised their parents and teachers. Many young attendees began showing increased interest in music, community service, and British history. Schools reported that lessons about the monarchy and British cultural traditions suddenly became much more engaging for students who had personal experience of royal celebration. The elderly attendees, who had been embraced by younger families during the celebration, found that their isolation had been permanently broken. Many formed lasting friendships with the families who had adopted them for the evening, leading to regular social connections that enriched the lives of multiple generations. Community centers across London reported increased participation in intergenerational programs inspired by the bonds formed during the royal welcome. Eleanor Davies, the event coordinator who had volunteered her expertise during the celebration, was offered a position with the royal household to help organize future community-focused events. Her acceptance of the role represented a bridge between the formal palace system and the grassroots energy that had made the homecoming celebration so special. The media coverage of the event continued to be analyzed and celebrated months later. Journalism schools used the broadcast coverage as an example of how to capture authentic human emotion during live events, while the social media response became a case study in positive online community building during a time when digital platforms were often criticized for spreading division. As the first anniversary of the celebration approached, London began planning a commemorative event that would honor not just the royal couple's return, but the spirit of community unity that had made the evening so memorable. The planning process itself became a celebration of the diverse voices and perspectives that had contributed to the original magical night. The lasting legacy of that extraordinary evening went far beyond the immediate joy it had created. It had demonstrated that in an age of increasing division and digital isolation, the fundamental human desire for community and shared celebration remained as powerful as ever. London had shown the world that true unity emerges not from carefully planned ceremonies, but from the authentic affection and spontaneous generosity of ordinary people who choose to celebrate together. The city's lights had indeed burned brightly that night, but more importantly, they had illuminated the enduring bonds of community, tradition, and shared joy that continued to define London's spirit in the modern world.